Very exciting stuff. Thank you, Chelsea. Thank you for the great work you're doing. I want to welcome our friends online as well. So glad you're with us. If you would like to either sow into Chelsea's ministry personally or into the work we're doing in the Caribbean, if you want to join a part of our team, just see her after service. If you're tuning in online, you can, if you go to the giving tab on the app, you can either give toward the work in the Caribbean through a special offering or join Chelsea's team. Thank you so much. Welcome. If we've not had the pleasure to meet, my name's Keith. I'm the lead pastor here. So glad to have you with us. And again, now our second service online. So it's cool. We're actually as scattered as we've ever been now, over 2 live services and 2 virtual services as well. But it's great to still be just one family. And I learned a couple things this week. It was a learning week around the Tower household, at least around the Tower kitchen. There is a big difference, you may or may not know this, between grilling and barbecuing. Significant difference. Now, as a master griller, I figure all problems can be solved with fire, but apparently not necessarily with barbecue. I wanted to bless Jennifer and grill some, or barbecue, some baby back ribs. So I got some awesome ribs, real nice, good meat, and all this kind of stuff, but I'm not a barbecuer, I'm a griller. So I read the package, and it says, you know, that I'm supposed to do it for at least an hour and a half. Slow heat, just to get them just right, minimum hour and a half. So then I flipped through my grilling book just to make sure, went online, watched some videos, minimum hour and a half, low heat, no problem. So I grilled up these wings. Oh, I wish. It's getting closer to lunchtime. Grilled up the ribs, and hour and a half later, they were kind of tough. I mean, just bearing my soul before you, they were just tough, kind of tough to chew. Kind of had to fight with the bones to get them out of the way, and you know, I had envisioned just the bones literally falling out of the meat, and they weren't that, and they were kind of dry too, actually, dry and tough. So, yay! Happy birthday, Jennifer. Glad you're blessed by that. It wasn't her birthday, but anyway, so. A little bit later in the week, she said, I'm going to make some pulled pork. Like, okay, cool. Well, that sounds really neat. So she had this big, just chunk of pork with a bone in the middle of it, just this big thing. And she, you know, shook a couple little things on it, set it in her crock pot, put the lid on, put it on low, and we went out and about for the day. And at some point I said, hey, you know, what about your pork? And she goes, oh, it's cooking. And I'm like, okay, but you're not like there cooking it. Anyway, 10 plus hours later, she said, hey, watch this. And she takes the lid off, and the bone is in the middle of this chunk of meat. She grabs the bone and pulls it right out of the meat. Like all the meat just fell off. And then she like shreds it like so daintily. It was just fell apart, and it was juicy and succulent. It was everything my ribs weren't. And you're saying, why am I telling you this? Well, everyone knows, and I'm sure we can all agree, that life is like meat, right? If you wait long enough, it can get better. If you don't wait long enough, life can be kind of tough. In fact, if you don't wait long enough, life can get kind of dry. But if we're willing to wait long enough for the process that God would have for us, oh my goodness, the flavor, buddy, it's done right. Now here's the thing, I am used to grilling. So 7 minutes maybe for a hamburger. If I'm doing a steak, which I can grill to perfection, 14 to 16 minutes. So to me, an hour and a half seemed like just an agonizingly long wait for meat. Now, Jennifer's used to putting something in the crock pot, going about her day, so like 8 to 10 hours is like, whatever. I mean, I normally, take 10 to 12. So it didn't seem quite as long and agonizing for her as it felt for me. And in our fast culture, waiting can feel tough. Waiting can be a challenge. But if there's a longer process that we're supposed to take, as much as we love what waiting produces in us, none of us like the process. And we're tempted, if we're not careful, to short circuit it. But to take the absolute minimum time that it takes. And life works, it's just a little tougher. You can still survive, but it just takes some of the zest and dries life out. No, the hour and a half minimum was not so that it would be good, it was just so you wouldn't get sick. And some of us are content with waiting just long enough to not be dangerous for us, but not long enough to really see the juiciness that God wants to put in our life. We're in a series, second week of a series called That. It's not called that, it's that. It's a symbol. It's that agonizing 3 dots when you're waiting for a text. We've all been in that position where we've communicated with somebody and we're waiting back. We've all hopefully been in that position where we've been talking to God and desiring something from Him, and we find ourselves waiting. And the temptation is to short circuit the process or to get out in front of Him. We're going to talk today about several different passages, so buckle up. We're going to jump all over the Bible today because the Bible is full of conversation about waiting and the benefits of waiting. We're going to start off in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 1. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, starting in verse 1, says, "There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven." This is the first sentence of a relatively well-known passage. There was an old song by the Byrds where they said, "To everything there's a season, turn, turn, turn." Right? Footloose, they quote it in Footloose, and the famous court scene where he talks about there's a time for everything, but it goes on and talks about all these times. It says there's a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill, time to heal, time to tear down, time to build, time to weep, time to laugh, time to mourn, time to dance, time to time to time to time to time. There's a time for everything. And there's a season for every activity under heaven. One of your big ideas is this, is that though just because there is a time doesn't mean that this is the time. There's a time for everything, but just because there's a time for everything doesn't mean that this is the time for that thing. Let me just say it another way. Every activity, the text says, has a season, but that doesn't mean that this is the season. The challenge of waiting and the power of waiting is in knowing what activity is right for what season. There are seasons, and there are some activities that will flourish during certain seasons that won't flourish during other seasons. And the challenge is like, I feel like I want to do this, but it's not this season. But the power, as we'll see later on, is that there is a season where the current is moving with you in a particular direction. And whether or not we're fighting with God or God is fighting with us has everything to do with our understanding of what season we find ourselves in. And the idea of seasons they're just unavoidable. God put them in the created order. From the time the flood, if we go way back in Genesis chapter 7 and Genesis chapter 8, God changed a whole lot about the created order. He flooded everything, and he rescued a man named Noah and his family and 2 of every animal. End of Genesis chapter 7 and early Genesis chapter 8, the boat came to rest on a mountain and the floodwaters subsided and everything was different. And Noah's talking to God, and God's speaking to Noah and starts to explain to him what had changed, but also what was the same. He's kind of letting him know how creation is going to work from this point forward. In Genesis 8:22, God says to Noah, "While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease." As long as the earth is the earth, which it still is, There were some things that will not cease. God was letting Noah, and by virtue of letting Noah know, letting the rest of all of humanity that will ever live know that seasons will exist. There's a seed time and there's a harvest. There's a time to do certain activities, to plant seeds. And there's a time to do other activities where I'm not doing some activities, but I'm doing others. I can harvest what had been planted. I can't harvest what had been planted in one season if it hadn't been planted in the season it had been planted. And I also don't go plant when it's time to harvest. There's summer, there's winter, there's cold, there's heat, there's day, there's nights. It will be true of the created order that seasons and proper times for stuff happens. Now, growing up, you could always tell what season it was in our household based on what sports equipment was out. Up north, they have, interesting for us Floridas, they have 4 seasons. It's crazy. 4 distinct, I guess theoretically we have 4 seasons, right? We've got acorns, leaves, love bugs, and hot, right? But they have actual distinct seasons. Like summertime is nice. It's like a Florida winter. It's just beautiful out. And then it starts to cool off in the fall and the leaves crinkle and fall and it's very pleasant and it's getting you, you start chopping your firewood and get ready for winter time, which is cold and snowy. And then you feel yourself emerging from it and things start to bloom again in the springtime, getting you ready for the summer. 4 distinct seasons. And you could always tell, even if you didn't look at a calendar or look out your window or look at your thermometer, you could tell what season it was in our household because if the baseball mitts and the spikes were out, it was summertime. Every summer, it was baseball time, right? So it works when the weather's nice to be outside playing baseball. Then you could tell without looking outside to see if the leaves were changing. You could tell because the football helmets and the pads came out that, it must be getting cooler, must be autumn. And then you knew when those things were put away and the indoor sporting equipment, the basketball shoes were coming out that you could go, well, it must be winter time because the sports and activities have moved inside. Now, theoretically, in the winter with snow on the ground, theoretically you could play baseball, but if you've ever hit with an aluminum bat when your hands are cold, doesn't feel good. If you ever tried to field a white ball in snow, it's tough. You ever tried to round the bases in boots? I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just saying in the wrong season, it's just tough. And it doesn't work properly. In the summertime, when it's blistering hot, man, that's not when you want to put on the pads and the helmets. You want to wait till you could, theoretically, but it's just, man, you're going to be dried out. There's a better time in a season after it cools off to start to play football. We know this naturally, but God has designed seasons. They're unavoidable, and by virtue of there being seasons, there's a specific and better time to do certain activities. And our job is to wait until the right time for the right activity. Now, nature gets this concept. Psalm 104, verse 19 says, "The moon marks off the seasons, and the sun knows when it's time to go down." Nature gets this idea of seasons. The sun is perfectly content to have places and times where it's dark. The sun is actually perfectly content to let the moon take center stage. There's times where the sun is bringing all of its power to bear in a region, and then there's times where it's like, you know what? They won't freeze to death if I'm somewhere else. Nature, the way God has created it, gets seasons, and it works seasonally, and the moon is fine with emerging and being center stage for a little bit, but then also yielding to the sun. It understands there's a time where it's supposed to move the tides and times where it's supposed to go somewhere else. Nature gets it. But sometimes we don't. In fact, Jeremiah says it like this in Jeremiah 8:7. Told you we're going to be all over the Bible today. Jeremiah 8:7 says, even the stork in the sky knows her appointed seasons. And the dove, the swift, and the thrush, those are types of birds, by the way, observe the time of their migration. But my people do not know the requirements of the Lord. What he's saying, like, this idea of seasons, nature gets it, even the birds. And I think he's kind of throwing some shade at the stork, because he's like, look, even the stork, right? I don't know if a stork's considered smart or not, but I know I'm not the smartest man, but I'm guessing I'm smarter than a stork. But there's something about birds that, despite them not having the reasoning capacity in the image of God that people have, they've still instinctually, if nothing else, have figured out this idea of seasons. There's a period of time where they're all kind of sitting there and they're enjoying their happy summer, and then I don't know if it's the change of the weather or barometric pressure, or they can notice leaves starting to get crinkly, or temperature, the shortness of the day. I don't know what it is, but at some point the birds go, you know what? Life will be better if we cease to stay here and we go there. They know somehow to migrate, and essentially what they're perceiving is there's going to be a time coming up where during the time life will be hard here, life will be tough here. Our provision is going to dry up like my barbecued ribs here. It's going to get tough and dry up, and for whatever reason during this next season, I just think it's going to be different here. Life here will work differently than it does there. But they don't stay here. They enjoy the provision of God. They eat. They do happy bird things. They raise their little egglets and all that stuff. And then at some point, I don't know, is it it's getting too hot? Is it predators start coming out of their burrows? I don't know what exactly tips them off. But at some point they go, this season here has ended. And if we stay here, life's going to be tough because it's not the season for us to be in this spot. So they acknowledge this season and they move to a place where it is the season for them to live. And we watch them through the sky and we marvel at them and go, oh man, what great birds. And then God goes, hey guys, the birds have figured this out. That there are times and seasons and places where life works, and then times where that's not what they should be doing. But you guys haven't figured it out. My people don't know this. And it causes us problems. At the minimum, it causes us frustration in our life. Life starts to become tough. We're working against the natural order of a season. If you feel like you desire something, or you feel like God is stirring something, we all have those moments where we desire, or we feel maybe God is prompting or promising us something. And we've all had them when it's not the season to receive what we're desiring, right? So if you feel prompted or you feel like desiring something, but it's not the season to receive it, then what I would suggest is that we work on whatever development that season is providing for us. That we would grow in whatever manner the season allows. Because if I try to get what I want and it's not the season to get it, I'm just going to be frustrated. The flip side is true. If I don't allow the growth and the development that is inherent in the season in which I find myself, then when it's time to receive it, I'm actually going to have difficulty receiving it, which is going to be frustrating. So it's kind of two sides. If I pursue that which it's not season to have, I'm my efforts are going to be frustrated because I can't get it. But if I spend that whole time trying to get it, when it is time to receive it, I actually haven't gained what is natural for God to develop in me during the season of waiting. And now I can't actually lay a hold of it, and I'm frustrated. By the way, if you're not sure what you should be growing in a season of waiting, if nothing else, just grow closer to God. Because it's always season for that. It's always season to draw nearer to Him. It's always season to discover what He's like and how He desires to move in your life. And I would suggest that the God who created the seasons would actually prefer that if I don't know what I'm supposed to be getting from this season, if I press into Him, that's actually the key to understanding what can actually emerge from the season. Daniel writes this in Daniel 2:20 and 21. Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are His, and He changes the times and the seasons. He removes kings and raises up kings. Seasons can be hard because I want something and I'm being asked to wait for a different time. That's tough. But Daniel said, man, I bless you, God, for that. And then he tells us a couple things. We know that in the created order, there are seasons. God hits some things about seasons and pushes autopilot. Winter, spring, summer, love bugs, right? It happens. But then he also says He changes the times and the seasons. This is different than the generic God created them and therefore they change. This is another step where He actually intervenes and puts His hands on stuff. And He starts to go, I know there's general seasons as people are growing, but there's a season where I'm going to particularly intervene and put my hand on it, and I can change the season. I can make it a season of internal growth, or I can make it a season of external reaping. He has the ability to do that. He changes those, and He has the wisdom and the might to change the seasons. One of the greatest frustrations of the human soul is when we try to change the season while lacking both the wisdom and the might to do it. It's not ours to do. The changing of large seasons and micro seasons belongs to God. And you and I do not have the wisdom or the power to intervene. At the risk of saying the obvious has been said about a bajillion times, 2020 was a weird year, right? Super weird. Disrupted everything. But one of the phenomenon that I found really interesting, and I understand why it happened. I get a couple things about human nature, but one of the things that I found really interesting is toward the tail end of 2020, and people were just dying for something that felt normal. Did y'all notice how early people put up their Christmas trees this year? Yeah. Did you notice that? Yeah. It was like the day Halloween was over, November 1, man. We just skipped Thanksgiving, although there was a lot to be thankful for. It didn't feel like it. And we went right to Christmas. People that don't like Christmas carols were playing them in November, and they don't like them Christmas morning. Right? The trees went up, the lights went up, and what you were seeing was a desire for a new season. Right? Like, I gotta, anything that's not what it's been. And we used all of our power to will normalcy into our lives. Every one of us wanted this weirdness to change, and every one of us at some level desired, like, I just want a Norman Rockwell Christmas with the family having hot cocoa around the tree. We wanted it so bad, we started trying to force the season to start earlier. And no matter how early you put your tree up, you could not bring December 25th here any quicker. And you could not move the virus and its impact out of your life any faster. Because you don't have the might. Nor do I. You don't have the wisdom. Nor do I. But someone does. There is a good God who controls those things. He set them in the created order, and he puts his hand on them explicitly. And to work against the seasons, to not wait long enough, both because they exist and because God is doing something, you cannot accelerate a season that God in his wisdom and might has decided it's the season for. We can't. All we can do is try and thereby make our life hard. Pastor Keith, I thought we were going to talk about the challenge of waiting and the power of waiting. Well, that's the challenge of waiting, is that we desire something and it's not the season for it. And what we need to do is find what the season is that God's already preordained and work with it. That's where the power comes in. Look at Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 14. It says, when times are good, be happy. But when times are bad, consider. God has made the one as well as the other. Therefore, a man cannot discover anything about his future. He's telling us how we're supposed to interact with seasons. When times are good, you know what? Enjoy it. Enjoy it. When things are rolling, when business is good, when money's flowing, when the food's cooking, when your relationships are rocking and rolling, enjoy it. Go with it. Be happy with the season that we're in. But by virtue of him saying, when it's good, be happy. When it's good, enjoy it. He's simultaneously saying, here's how not to go through a good season. Sitting around worried about when it's going to end. That's one of the challenges of a good season, and knowing that there are seasons, is we sit there and go, I can't really enjoy this because I know it's going to end and I'm worried it's going to happen now. And we start to, short circuit the blessing that we are to be enjoying because we know that at some point it's not going to be there, and we begin to worry and fret, and we pull the problem of this ending into the enjoyment of it, and it gets all muddled. What should you and I do when the season is harvest? Buddy, harvest. When the clients are coming in, what do? Man, enjoy the heck out of that. Have fun with it. Be happy. And because I don't have to fret that it's going to end. I know that is just part of life. There's times where seasons become tough, and he tells us what to do with that. But when times are bad, rather than going, oh, this is terrible, oh, God, where are you? Or, oh my gosh, what did I do to cause this? He says, here's what you do when times are tough. Consider something. God has made the one as well as the other. So when times get bad, I don't have to go, what did I do to cause this? And feel guilty. I also don't have to get angry at God, like, why is he doing this? I just need to consider that he made both. He made the good season and the difficult season. Well, if he's a good God who wants me to be more like Christ, why would he make both? I mean, I understand the blessed one. Could there be something he wants to do in me? Could there be a growth that he has for me? Could there be a trust that I can develop in him? Could there be something I could discover about him if I would just simply consider that maybe, I didn't do this or he's not doing it to me. He created both for me. In the good times, I get to see about God's good provision. I get to see what it looks like when I apply biblical principles to my relationship and they flourish. In the hard times, where whatever I do, I just cannot produce, I actually get to see what God's provision for me looks like. That he can take care of me in the same way he can take care of the sparrow. Yeah. He can do that. I don't have the ability to anymore, yet I haven't starved to death yet. It's amazing. when my relationships are strained, I can find satisfaction in the lover of my soul, as well as find the humility to say, maybe I've contributed to this, and the grace of God to repent and experience forgiveness. Those are gifts. There are things I can discover about God in difficult times. But he says this too. He's made both, and one of the reasons it says, therefore, no one can discover anything about their future. Therefore could also be translated, another translation says, so that. So I go through good and bad seasons, which God is the only one who has the wisdom and might to create those and allow those. I go through those so that no one can discover anything about their future. I got a phone call yesterday from my goddaughter. Super exciting phone call. She's getting married, and she asked me to marry her and her new fiance. And I'm like, yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. What an honor. I'm thrilled. I can't wait. When's the wedding? And she said 574 days. And I'm like, that's precise. Like, next June would be fine, but I'm like, 500. I'm like, wow, okay, do we know it to the minute? And she goes, well, I could tell you that. And I'm like, that's weird. And she said, no, they have an app where you can pin a good event, the day that you have it and the time that you've picked, and it'll just start a countdown. So she could literally tell me to the second when that glorious moment was going to happen. Life's not like that. God does not give you and I an app to say, the good season ends here, or the challenging season you're in ends here. He doesn't do that. And the reason he doesn't do that is it would remove from you and I the joy of learning to trust him in all things. Rather than trust him in all things, I just got to endure until my phone beeps. Well, that's a dry life. That's a bare minimum. Keep me from getting sick. Hang on life. Whereas my friends, he has a stretch of growth and something I can be developing at every stage of my life and every season in which I encounter. I can know him more, and he can take things out of me and deposit things into me, in good or bad. Hey, when it's great, he tells you, be happy. Enjoy it to its absolute fullest. I don't have to worry about the clock is ticking down. I need to start getting sad now. Just enjoy it. He'll take care of it ending. And then when it's tough, I don't have to feel guilty about it being there. It's just the nature of a season of life. But what would he show me during it? Leviticus 26:4, look at this. This can help us when we're in a difficult season to learn these couple things. God says, I will send you rain in its season, and the ground will yield its crops, and the trees of the field their fruit. This is a great way to wait. Look at this. It's much better to wait and to work within the season as God has ordered them. And it's much harder to not wait and try to produce out of season what God is not bringing forth to produce. You can work a field day and night. You can plow and grind and sweat and do everything you can to bring forth a crop. But if God hasn't sent the rain, or the ground doesn't push up the crop, you got nothing to show for your efforts. Here's the crazy thing. If you do nothing but God sends the rain and the ground pushes up the crop, you have everything. And they both come when God decides and the ground decides, and neither of them come because of your effort. So I can work and grind out of season trying to bring about what I think God has for me, and it will not get here any faster than God deciding to send the rain. The only thing is, I'm tired. and frustrated, maybe mad at God. But look at what it says. I will send the rain. When? In its season. So there's two things. He will send it. But he'll send it when he determines it's the right time to send it. So I can go through a dry season knowing that rain is coming, and I can do dry season activities and not try to be reaping a harvest, because the harvest is not coming until he decides to send rain. However, during a dry season, I do got to put some seeds in the ground. I don't have to do much else. I just got to get them in there and cover them up. Because until the rain comes, they're not going to produce anything anyway. But the rain comes and I haven't put them in, I still don't have a harvest. So I don't have to pull rain out of the sky. I don't have to redirect a river through my front yard so that I don't have to do it. I just got to put something in the ground out of sight underneath. Usually the dry seasons where we don't have a massive harvest, there's something that God's doing internal, below the surface, that most people don't see. And I have to allow that, because at some point he's going to bring the rain, and what the rain is going to do is allow to grow up whatever's been first planted. So I allow him peace, and patience, and love, and joy, and his word, and quality relationships. I build those things, and they're underneath. And when he decides it's time to rain, that's his job. Something's springing forth. What'd you plant during the dry times? And then he says this, the ground will yield its crops. Wait, he brings the rain, the ground yields the crops. Well, what the heck does the farmer do? He waits. That's it. He waits. The farmer does not pull a plant up out of the ground. When a person tries to pull a plant out of the ground, we damage it. When the ground pushes a plant up, it flourishes. So our job is to let the season push life up and wait patiently and not harvest before it's harvest time. Because if you pluck that first little green thing, you're not going to have many more little green things. We wait. There's a season. I want to close with this last passage. It's kind of one of the more famous ones on waiting in Isaiah chapter 40. Anytime you have a series about waiting, or you're talking about waiting, or you're asked to wait on in God, everyone goes to Isaiah 40. And look at what it says, starting in verse 28. Have you not known? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. By the way, if you ever want to start talking about anything, starting with the greatness of God is always a good place. So any new chapter of your life, any new season of your life, any new thought you want to bring forth, any new idea you want to proof test in the world, start with how awesome God is and how great. That's a good place. Good job, Isaiah. We give you a thumbs up approval from 2,800 years later. Anyway, he goes on and says, look about what he says about this great God. He does not faint or grow weary. A little bit later, if you're familiar with the passage, he's going to start talking about how we're not going to grow faint or grow weary. But look where the ability to not grow faint or grow weary originates. It's part of God. He doesn't grow faint, which means he's not weak. He's not wimpy. There's nothing beyond his ability to exert power in. Endless power. He does not. There's not like the dudes in Gold's Gym, right? And they get like this one, you throw 10 more pounds on and they've hit their limit. I can't lift anymore. That's as far as I can go. God's not in training. There's nothing beyond his strength. He doesn't grow faint. He's strong all the time. And then it says he never grows weary. When he exerts his strength, it doesn't tire him out. That is understand, before we go further, it's crucial to understand that not growing faint and not growing weary are attributes of God. Let's look a little bit further. His understanding is unsearchable. Verse 29, he gives power to the faint. And to him who has no might, he increases strength. What's he saying? God has all the strength. And you know what he does? He gives it. But by virtue of him giving his strength, it doesn't diminish his. It's not like he takes strength and cuts it in half and now he's weaker. He's able to distribute, but it never diminishes him. So when we lack strength, he can give it. Now watch this. Verse 30, even youths shall grow faint and be weary. I feel like I've heard those two terms before. And young men shall feel exhausted. So the strongest among us, the most dynamic, the Energizer bunnies in our world, that just seem like, man, they can go and go and go and they're vibrant. Even those guys at some point get tired. At some point, unlike God who never grows faint, at some point they hit a limit to their strength and a limit to their endurance. Even youths will grow faint, and even young men, at some point they're going, oh man, I am out of gas. But, watch this, those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. Oh, wait. There's a God who won't faint and will not be weary. There are people that God will empower beyond their own strength, because in our own strength at some point we grow weary and faint, even the young and dynamic among us. There are people who God will give strength and power to who now will not faint and be weary. Will not be weary. Who does he give that to? Those who wait. Wait for what? It's important to know who he empowers that way. It's those who wait. But the real question is, wait for what? They wait for the right season. Those who decide to water during the season that God sends the rain. It's not much effort. Because God is exerting his strength in sending the rain, I just decide that this would be a great time to water. I'm going to go into watering season. Oh, no way. I'm not going to get weary of this. You're bringing the water. Those who wait for the season for the earth to push up, and I'm going to call that harvest. I'm not going to plow and dig and try to find something out here. I'm going to call harvest when God pushes up. So he's providing the strength of growth, and all I got to do is walk in agreement with what season he's in. Why is that tiring? You know what? When Jennifer made the pulled pork, you know how much effort she did? Like so little. I actually put the pork in there. I mean, she did put the lid on and turn a knob. And she did nothing for 10 hours. Not one single thing. It happened. You know how hard I worked for really lousy ribs? I was flipping those suckers every 2 seconds. They looked a little dry, so I put sauce on them. The sauce burned, so I scraped it off. Dude, when I was done, I'm like, these better be better than Chili's. And they were awful. They were not good, and I was spent. But I didn't wait long enough. She walked away, spent no effort, and it was succulent. God renews the strength, not because I'm tired and he reinfuses it, because I just do what he is already doing. Let's pray. Jesus, thank you for your word being true. I pray it would accomplish everything you sent it forth to in our folks today. God, help us wait well. Help us not strive and strain out of season. Help us not be frustrated because we're trying to bring forth something that you're not yet trying to bring forth. I pray through the remainder of this series and through what we heard today, we discover that you're already at work somewhere in our life. And we would agree to let that be what we're going to work out in our life. Not before you, not after you, just simply when you decide it's time. Bless all your saints, both here gathered and gathered with us online. In Jesus' name, amen.
Yes, God, we thank you. We thank you for what you've done today. We thank you for what you're going to do. God, and we thank you that we get to be called your children. Let's stand up and worship. And let's just praise God going out today. Your plans for me are good. I know you hold my future and my hope. Your promises never fail. Your promises never fail. Your promises never fail. Your promises never fail. Let's sing healing. You speak favor over me. Faith is breaking all impossibility. Your name has overcome, your name alone. For I know your thoughts, your plans for me are good. I know you hold my future and my hope. Your promises never fail. Your promises never fail. Your promises never fail. Your promises never fail. Come on, put your hands together. I am standing on every promise that you make. I will see it come to pass in your name. I will trust every word I hear you say. I will see it come to pass in your name. In your name I'm standing. I am standing on every promise that you make. I will see it come to pass in your name. In your name, Jesus. Jesus, I will trust every word I hear you say. I will see it come to pass in your name. In your name, I will see it come to pass in your name. In your name, I will see it come to pass in your name. In your name. Thank you, HighPoint. We love you. We're so thankful that you are with us this morning. May God bless you. May he keep you. And may you just have a great rest of your weekend. God bless you guys. Thank you for worshiping with us this morning.